The air in the briefing room was thick with tension. Pilots in sleek flight suits lounged around a massive oval table, their conversations a blend of bravado and frustration. On the projection screen, telemetry data from the latest F-39 Spectre test flight flickered like a dying heartbeat. A failure. Again. "Coffee," Major Alec Thorne snapped, not looking up from the tablet in his hand. "Someone get more coffee in here. Real pilots need to think." His voice cut through the room like a knife, dripping with condescension. A few of the other pilots chuckled, not because it was funny, but because it was easier than challenging him. In the corner, a young woman in a plain airman's uniform moved toward the side table. She didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. Her hands were calm, methodically preparing a fresh carafe. Nobody looked at her twice. To them, she was background noise, invisible, unimportant. Except to General Wallace. From his seat at the head of the table, the general watched her movements with subtle curiosity. The way she poured the water, the steady way she moved. There was something deliberate about her, controlled, precise. But it wasn't until she turned, just slightly, and the fabric of her left sleeve shifted that he noticed it. A small circular patch, barely visible, midnight blue with a silver streak across it. Most would miss it, most wouldn't know what it meant. But Wallace did. His gaze sharpened. He leaned forward ever so slightly in his chair, and for the first time that morning, he wasn't thinking about the failing jet, the funding crisis, or the political pressure. He was thinking about that patch, and the woman wearing it. "Gentlemen," Major Thorne began, pacing in front of the screen, "what we're dealing with is pilot error dressed up as engineering failure." He jabbed his finger at the red line on the screen, a flat spin graph. The left engine flames out at high Gs. The computer system reacts wrong. It's not a design flaw, it's over-reliance on tech. What this jet needs is a real stick and rudder man. He smirked at his own words. The room was quiet, not from agreement but from exhaustion. This was the third failed flight in 2 weeks. Millions burned. No solutions found. In the back, the airman had quietly finished refilling the coffee. She stood against the wall, still as stone. Thorne glanced over, his smirk widening. "Maybe our friend back there can explain to us why this billion-dollar bird can't fly straight." A few chuckles echoed. The woman didn't move. She didn't even blink. But Wallace was watching. Again, he saw it. Not pride, not offense, but focus. Intent. She wasn't humiliated. She was observing. The lead civilian engineer, drenched in nervous sweat, stood up shakily. "We've run simulations, Major. The failure isn't manual. The pilot loses control because airflow collapses. It's not something you fix with instinct." Thorne waved him off. "Simulations don't fly jets, pilots do." Another silence, another dead end. Wallace tapped his fingers slowly, then looked again at the girl in the corner. He didn't see a coffee girl anymore. He saw a loaded weapon, waiting for the right moment. And then, she moved. She walked, silent as wind, toward the front of the room. Thorne blinked. "Is this a joke?" But she didn't answer. She picked up the marker and started to write. Her hand moved across the whiteboard with fluid grace, not hesitation, not guessing, but mastery. The room of engineers and pilots sat frozen as symbols appeared in rapid succession. She wasn't doodling. She was solving. Lines curved into airflow diagrams. Pressure gradients intersected with control vectors. The F-39's airframe appeared in a perfectly scaled sketch. Her analysis went deeper than any they'd seen. Forces, angles, spin vectors. Her silence wasn't awkward. It was surgical. Thorne's smirk faded. "Wait, what is that?" he asked, stepping closer. She didn't respond. Wallace rose slowly. Every detail she drew felt familiar, but refined, like someone had taken their scattered theories and organized them into one clean, terrifying truth. She circled a specific point on the left canard wing, subtle oscillation creating a chaotic vortex. At exactly 72 Gs, the vortex fed directly into the left engine intake, choking airflow. It wasn't a system failure, it was physics, invisible until now. And then came the solution. She drew a thin metal strip, a vortex generator, tiny, elegant. Positioned just right, it would break the spiral, redirect air, stop the flameout before it started. It was genius. The room collectively held its breath. She capped the marker and stepped back. Thorne was pale. That can't be right. But no one echoed him this time, because they all saw it. Captain Wallace stared at the whiteboard, then at her uniform. His eyes locked on the patch again, a silent signal from another world, one where machines that don't exist are flown by people who aren't supposed to. He took a breath, then spoke only 2 words. "Who are you?" The silence was electric. Every officer, every engineer, every mouth-breather who had snickered moments ago, they were now watching her like she had just unlocked the code to the universe. General Wallace didn't wait for her answer. He turned sharply to his aide. "Pull up her record. Now." The aide scrambled with the tablet, a few awkward taps. Then, the projector flickered. The whiteboard equations disappeared, replaced by a clean personnel file. Name, Morgan Evelyn Rank. Captain Division, Special Projects. 417th Squadron status, active duty. And then, line after line of classified aircraft ratings, X-Series, Black Projects, Experimental Propulsion Systems. She wasn't just an officer, she was a ghost. Wallace stared, then turned back to the room. "That patch," he said quietly, "is from the 417, the most secretive test flight unit in existence." Now people were standing. The engineers leaned in. Pilots looked at each other, stunned. The arrogance had drained from Thorne's face completely. He looked like a child who'd just realized the adult in the room had been watching the whole time. "She's not from Ops," Wallace continued. "She's the one who writes the flight manuals before they reach Ops." Captain Morgan stood still, arms behind her back, eyes neutral. She hadn't asked for recognition. She hadn't corrected anyone. She had simply done what needed to be done, perfectly. Wallace took a breath, then brought his hand up into the sharpest salute anyone in that room had ever seen. "Captain Morgan," he said with command and reverence, "the floor is yours." The room that once echoed with laughter and arrogance was now frozen in reverent silence. Captain Morgan didn't need to respond. She returned the salute with a crisp nod, no words, no dramatics. Then she turned back to the whiteboard, tapped one point gently with her finger. "This is the fix," she said, her first words. Her voice was calm, low, controlled. The engineers scrambled toward the diagram, mumbling in disbelief. One of them whispered, "She solved in 5 minutes what we've been circling for a month." Thorne stood off to the side, jaw tight. His pride was a collapsed airframe. But he said nothing. One of the younger pilots leaned in to Wallace. "She's flown the Spectre, hasn't she?" Wallace nodded. "Flown it, fixed it, and redesigned half of it. Before we even got our first briefing, the fix, later dubbed the Morgan modification, was simple. A sub-$1,000 solution that saved a $20 billion program. The briefing ended differently than any before. No debates, no applause, just realization. Captain Morgan left without fanfare. No exit line, no glance back. She wasn't interested in being celebrated, just in solving the problem. Outside, the sun hit the flight line. Mechanics scrambled. Pilots suited up. But inside the minds of every person in that room, something fundamental had changed. They had seen real competence, and real competence had no need for noise. Word spread fast. By evening, every squadron on base had heard it. "The coffee girl? She's 417. It bounced from hangars to hallways, the story growing but never exaggerated, because the truth didn't need exaggeration. They called it the equation. A photo of the whiteboard was laminated and posted in every ready room. No caption was needed, just her diagram. Engineers copied her math like scripture. Pilots studied the airflow chart with reverence. And Major Thorne? He didn't speak for the rest of the day. That night, someone saw Morgan alone in the hangar. Grease on her flight suit, tool in hand, working quietly on the test unit's backup jet. No cameras, no officers, just her and the machine. She wasn't chasing praise. She was chasing perfection. The Spectre's redesign began immediately. Her Vortex mod was installed on 3 test units within 48 hours. Simulations ran. Everyone passed. Then came the real flight, and Morgan flew it, alone. She took the F-39 to its limits, full G-turns, stall conditions, max altitude rollouts, and she brought it home without a tremor. When she landed, the entire hangar watched. No cheering, just silence, and then a single respectful nod from the ground chief. That was enough. Morgan nodded back. The lesson was loud, even if she never raised her voice. The next morning, Major Thorne stood outside the simulator bay. He wasn't there to lecture or lead. He was there to learn. Morgan stood inside, observing a young pilot running spin recovery drills. The simulator screens glowed with telemetry data. Thorne approached slowly, removing his flight gloves. "Captain," he said, voice stripped of ego, "I owe you an apology." Morgan didn't speak. "I judged you," he continued. Before I saw you, before I understood. He paused, glancing at the screen. Your airflow model. I've been reading it all night. I still don't fully get it, especially the oscillation transfer. Morgan looked at him, then at the screen. Her expression was unreadable. Finally, she gave a single nod. Come here, she said, motioning him closer. She tapped the screen gently. This is where the chaos begins, she explained. If you can understand this moment, this microsecond of instability, you can control the whole aircraft. Thorne leaned in, and for the next hour, he listened. He asked questions, took notes. No sarcasm, no pride, just learning. That day, something rare happened. An ego surrendered to excellence, and a student was born. That night, in the officers' lounge, a few engineers sat quietly at a corner table. There was no laughter, no bravado, just quiet respect. Captain Morgan sat with them, sipping black coffee, her flight suit still smeared with oil from the test flight. She wasn't talking much, but someone had placed a napkin in front of her. A challenge. What would you add, one asked cautiously, if we wanted to boost high-altitude maneuverability? Morgan didn't reply. She just took the pen. On the napkin, she began sketching a new winglet design, something no one had seen before, a dynamic rudder extension system using minimal mechanical load. The idea was so elegant it felt unreal. By the time she pushed the napkin away, the engineers were staring at it like it held the secrets of the universe. She stood, nodded once, and left. That napkin would be framed within 24 hours. Its diagram would go on to influence the next major update to the Spectre. And once again, she hadn't said more than 10 words. She let the design speak for her, and it spoke loudly. Within a week, every squadron on base knew her name. But it wasn't just pilots whispering about her anymore. It was Pentagon staffers, R&D directors, even generals who had never met her. Did you hear? They said. The girl with the patch solved the stall issue, in silence. Rumors swirled that DARPA had sent a letter of commendation, that an Air Force One engineer had personally requested her feedback, that her napkin sketch was now classified. But Morgan stayed silent. She walked the same hangars, ate in the same mess hall, wore the same plain flight suit. She wasn't climbing, she wasn't networking, she was working. That made the story spread even faster, because nothing travels louder than silence backed by brilliance. An unspoken rule emerged. When Captain Morgan entered a room, even higher-ranked officers stood. It wasn't about protocol, it was about respect. Young airmen began studying her flight logs. Mechanics asked to shadow her during repairs. Pilots requested her input on flight behaviors they didn't understand. Her salute became iconic, short, precise, and wordless. Some mimicked it, most simply tried to earn it. It was a salute not of rank, but of readiness. A recognition that this woman, in quietude and grease-stained sleeves, had changed the entire standard of what it meant to serve with honor. And she never once asked for it. Weeks later, a formal memo landed on General Wallace's desk. Subject line, Operational Protocol Update, Spectre Program. The author, Captain Evelyn Morgan. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a new doctrine, redefining emergency spin procedures, atmospheric stall thresholds, and pilot training simulations. Normally, such documents passed through layers of clearance. This one, it was signed off immediately, because everyone knew if Morgan wrote it, it worked. Her doctrine became required reading, even for those who once ignored her. Shortly after, Morgan was recommended for early promotion to major. The paperwork was flawless. But she declined. Her reason? I'm not done fixing things yet. The panel was stunned. No one declined that kind of recognition. But that's who she was. Her mission wasn't medals. It was machines, and making sure the people flying them came back alive. 6 months later, she flew her last Spectre sortie, not because she retired, but because she had nothing left to prove. She touched down after a 7-hour classified test run and walked straight into the hangar. No announcement, no debrief, just silence, and a final glance at the whiteboard photo now framed near the simulator bay. She gave it a look, not sentimental but satisfied. Then she vanished back into the shadows of special projects. Today her story is legend. Cadets had taught about the equation room. Pilots touch the whiteboard frame before first flight like a ritual. And every new Spectre carries a tiny engraving beneath the cockpit glass. MEM. No initials were ever explained. They didn't need to be, because those who knew that the most dangerous person in the room is never the loudest. It's the one quietly solving the impossible.